everybody! So here we are again with another video, and this time what I would want to talk about is TI versus TE. So we're going to talk about the logic functions. So why the logic functions? First of all, because I think they are among the most difficult to understand along with sensing functions. And second, because I just feel like talking about those. So where do we start? The first distinction that I want to make about these two functions is that TI, introverted logic, is depth of logic and personal logic, so personalized logic. So TI would be personalized and deep, whereas TE, extroverted thinking, would be breadth of logic and common logic, shared logic. So we can talk about depth of logic on one side and breadth of logic on the other side. So why this distinction of depth versus breadth? Because for a TI user, the most important thing is to understand things in depth. So the point for a TI user is to understand whatever it is that they're analyzing, studying, categorizing, or working with. So understanding in depth. Whereas for a TE user, the idea is rather to gather as many information as possible. So it's a matter of amount of data rather than understanding data in depth. Now, this doesn't mean that TI users are basically ignorant, that do not know a lot of things, and TE users are basically idiots that do not understand things. That's not how it works. What it means is simply that one kind of people is going to prioritize in-depth understanding over variety, whereas the other type is going to, the other kind of people is going to prioritize variety of information over in-depth of understanding. Over in-depth understanding. So that's the first distinction that we can make between these two functions. How does it show in school, in case any of you are going to school or remember their school years? It shows in that TE students would be those that learn by the book and repeat things many times, exactly as they're reported in books. So they learn what is written in the book. Whereas the TI user would be the kind of student that elaborates on his own or her own and reports things with a slightly or very different idea than what is actually written in the book. So they basically study on the same book, but one learns by the book, the TE user learns by the book, whereas the TI user elaborates a personalized idea of what they're reading. So that's the difference between the two. So you've got a TI student that is going to be the one that tries to understand everything, and a TE user that is going to be the one that wants to know the most things possible, to learn as many data as possible. That's why we often say that TI is categorizing, whereas TE is facts, attention to facts. Well, the other categorization that we made is personalized versus shared logic, shared information. That's pretty clear in the example that I just made, I think. But anyway, to make it explicit, the point is that the TI user is going to figure out his own way to conceive things. So it's their way of thinking, their idea, their opinion, what they consider to be correct. That's what TI is about. That's why we talk about categorization, like I just said. Whereas TE instead is what everybody thinks, what everybody understands, what everybody shares as an idea on that specific topic, so learning by the book. Examples of this kind of thing we can find in this kind of split we can find in society, in everyday life. TE would be mainstream society, so everything that goes by mainstream standards. So both in science studies and in music, cultural things, whatever. Mainstream would be extroverted thinking. So those people that like to do what others do, that like to join others, that want to do what others do, think like others think, and join others in their ways of thinking, and that actually build together this common thinking and this polarized way of thinking that goes in the same direction. That's extroverted thinking. The TI user, on the other hand, is going to be the person that disrupts or marginalizes themselves from that way of thinking. So for a TI user, what matters is what my opinion is and what I think about the matter. I as a TI user, obviously. So, and I'm not saying I'm a TI user, I'm saying the person that is a TI user. So anyway, the point here is that people that are TI users are going not to follow majority thinking. TI users are those people that are going to go against common beliefs. And here I'm going to call into question Kant and Piaget, just to name two in the whole thing. And here I'm trying to explain something that my body explained me. But that is not easy to deliver, so I'm going to call this two and use this two to help myself do that. So how does it work? Kant expresses an idea of thought, and Piaget and other authors in psychology tried to confirm what Kant considered to be the highest form of thought, the highest expression of the human mind, which is logic and syllogism. That's how Kant and Piaget considered logic understanding. So their way of conceiving logic is actually TI, so the ability to question things. So that's what they're talking about. And what they figured out, what Piaget actually figured out along with others that disrupted and confirmed his theory, what they found out is that what we think and what we understand as being correct, that it is something that is shared by the community or something that we come up with, ourselves, are forms of belief. So what we think is what we believe. The two things are the same thing. And what we believe is simply what it is. So we do not always have 100% confirmation that what we believe is actually true. There are things that cannot be found out, that we cannot know if they're true or not. And there are things that are only theorized. So whatever we decide to share or make ours as an idea or as a thought is something we believe in. So that's something to consider, because every time that we as socialists or MBTI people start fighting someone else because of what they're saying and what they think about the theory, we should keep into account that they're probably belonging the other form of thinking, and in that case we're never going to find common ground. So a TI user is going to disrupt everything that the majority says. And if you are disrupting what the majority says and someone comes to you and they say no because things are this way and this way and this way, that's a TE user. It's pointless to debate because you're never going to find common ground, because it's a matter of belief, and that's what the thinking functions and logic functions are based on. Your personal beliefs and how you choose to believe. So T users are people that grew connections in their brain to follow what the majority thinks, whereas TI users grew connections in their brain to become free thinkers. So it's the split. There's people that demonize free thinkers, there's people that demonize mainstream. So I'm not here to judge which one is better. But that's how things are. So people that disrupt stereotypes, people that disrupt what the majority think, are going to be TI users, whereas people that follow very precisely what the majority thinks, that's going to be a TI user. I think this is pretty clear, and I made the distinction quite clear, but I would like to add a little bit of an anecdote at the end, just to give you something to think about. If you ever watched the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, that movie there's the protagonist, it's Katarina Stratford. Don't tell me that it's a Shakespearean comedy. I know, I just don't know the title in English. So in Italian it would be La bisbetica domata, but I don't think that helps a lot. Anyway, it's a modern. It's one of those movies that were made to modernize something historical, and here I'm talking about a historical comedy. So anyway. What the movie is about is this girl that cannot fit in any possible way, that doesn't want to fit in, and that is not interested in fitting in. She goes against everything the majority says. She is basically the anti-majority. She is the outcast by choice. That kind of individual, there would be either an INFJ or an ISTP. That's how I categorize that kind of behavior. The character specifically should be more on the line of an INFJ, because she's not particularly rational. But anyway, yeah, INFJ, ISFJs, INTPs and ISTPs tend to have this extreme attitude against what the majority is. And that's particularly well shown when she is sent to the headmaster. And the headmaster says, I heard you terrorized Mr. Morgan's class again. And Katarina answers, expressing my opinion is not a terrorist act. Expressing my opinion is not a terrorist act. So this is the sentence I want to bring your attention to. She is terrorizing the class because she's expressing an opinion that is against what everybody else thinks. So that it goes against what is being taught and what everybody else believes. That's what a TI user is, and that's how TI users work, and that's why there is this constant battle in society between people that have a specific kind of belief and people that instead have another kind of belief. Now, a little bit of help for those of you who are trying to figure out their type and trust what I'm saying. Personally, sometimes or very often, I tend to get along a little bit better with people that have T and TI positioned in a specific way. So those types that have TI and TE positioned in the second, third position, they're going to get along slightly better, and that's because of how they deal and handle logic, because these types kind of seek the same answers. So ESTPs and ENTPs, they subconsciously use extroverted logic to support their introverted thinking, whereas ISTJs and INTJs, they use introverted logic to support their extroverted logic. Plus, they're both creative with their logics, because they seek and they want truth. And here I'm talking about very developed people, the utmost positivity that you can find in the types. What concerns instead INFJs and ISFJs they do not take into account facts and variety of knowledge, and they do not take into account what others think, and they go by their personal logic seeking truth. The same applies for TE users that are ENFPs and ESFPs that have extrovert thinking in the third position. They are using extroverted logic to find their truth. So they're seeking in society those sources that they can rely on that represent truth. So that's why these types, I believe, can get along slightly better, because they share a common goal, which is finding truth, assuming that they're actually willing to go somewhere and they're not underdeveloped or negative in any possible way, because there's everything in the world, and we know that. But I believe that there is a higher chance to get along among these types for that reason, because they're all seeking truth. So even if they do not find common ground in how they find truth, they find common ground in the final goal. So they have a better chance to find some sort of understanding. Not always, but in some cases. So this is an idea that I got because I've seen INFJs not getting along with ENFJs, I've seen ISFJs quarreling with ESFJs, and I've seen ESFPs not getting along with INFPs or ISFPs and such things, because of the different understanding of the logic functions. There's also some things about ethics, but I think that's more a guts thing, like getting along from a very heartfelt kind of way, kind of point of view. But that's another story, and we will talk about it another time. I think I will close this here, and I said enough about this topic, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!